Hello BookTube, welcome back to my 2024 library tour. I am continuing with my science fiction and fantasy collection. This is the 10th part. I'm continuing on with this bookcase that my brother built, which is right here. If you hear some noises during this video, my apologies, but behind me there is a mechanic shop and they are actually doing work today. So there might be some noises, but I will continue on. This part is going to be titled No, Not That 7. But I do start with superhero fiction. This is Hero by Perry Moore. This is a young adult superhero fantasy about a young man who is struggling both with his sexuality and with his desire to be a superhero against the opposition of his father. I tried this novel several years ago and I just don't really get on all that well with young adult fiction, despite how much I do want to read this book, or did want to read this book, because I myself am very interested in writing a superhero story, although not in prose form. This is Signal to Noise by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a contemporary fantasy set in Mexico City about two individuals who get involved with music-based magic. I had a go at it several years ago, and I just lost interest and just sort of bailed on it. Next is a book that I do not quite know why I have, and that is The Song of All by Tina LeCount Myers. I'm pretty sure I saw this on Thomas of SSF 180's, one of his mailbags several years ago, and thought it sounded interesting, but I just never got around to it. Next is a young adult novel that I did actually like the first time I read it, although not necessarily a second reread attempt. This is More Than This by Patrick Ness. This is a novel that is in part post-apocalyptic. It's about a young man who, when he catches his boyfriend cheating on him with a mutual friend, he goes to commit suicide. During his suicide attempt, he wakes up in his childhood home that has been abandoned, and he wakes up in this sort of weird technological bed type thing. And he discovers that he is actually back in his hometown and that the world has sort of fallen apart, and that he is one of very few people walking around. Gradually, he comes to remember that most humans have gone into a sort of a virtual reality dreamland with a few artificial intelligences or androids sort of trying to maintain the real world as much as they can and failing to do that. The first time I read it, I quite liked it, although a second attempt at reading it again did not turn out quite so well. The next 6 books are by Peter Newman in 2 separate trilogies. The first trilogy is composed of The Vagrant, The Malice, and The Seven. The Seven. So The Vagrant is post-apocalyptic. I think it's set on Earth, although it could be a fantasy world that's gone through a post-apocalyptic. It's about an invasion of demons and some form of artificial, angelic kind of defense mechanism against them. Uh, I read, or I started on The Vagrant, um, which is about a nameless warrior who adopts a baby while traveling through this dystopic, demon-infested world. Um, and I thought the first part was fairly interesting. It kept me engaged, but I gradually lost interest. Um, I don't remember if I've ever actually read The Malice or had a go at it. And I know for sure I've never gotten to the Seven. The other trilogy I have from him, all of which I bought from Book Depository, and you're probably questioning why exactly did I buy this since the first trilogy did not work out so well, is composed of The Deathless, The Ruthless, and The Boundless. And I haven't gotten to any of these yet, so. And I don't know if I ever actually will. Next up is yet another book that I don't know why I have in my collection, and that is Knights of Vilgemer by Mark Sharon Newton. This is a fantasy that I don't really recall much except for its sort of has a number of fantasy races, all trying to live together, although there is some conflict, and that I lost interest fairly quickly. I'm assuming I bought this for a Bell redemption that never happened. I don't actually remember if I tried a chapter for this book. This is Winter of Ice and Iron by Rachel Neumeier. Again, this is one of those books that I picked up from watching one of Thomas of SFF 180's mailbags, and either did I try a chapter tag and didn't care for it, or just haven't gotten to yet. The next few books I picked up from the Friends at the Library Sell Nook. This is The Ringworld Engineers by Larry Niven. I also have three by Andre Norton, The Beastmaster, which I might try for Rocket Summer or Rocket July. Also have Quake Keep by Andre Norton. And Starborn. Next is Son of the Storm by Suyi Davies Okungboa. I think this is the first in a series. I don't know if the sequel has come out yet, or any sequels have come out yet. This is about a young man who I think he's a scholar, who in a society that doesn't necessarily believe in magic, who meets a young warrior from outside his village who comes from a more magically based society, or she herself has some form of magical powers, or something like that. I have not gotten around to it yet. Next is The Throne of Amencor by Joshua Palmatier. This is a bind up uh, that includes the Skewed Throne, the Cracked Throne, and the Vacant Throne. Never got around to it. The next three books are classics of fantasy. The Gormenghast Trilogy. First up is Titus Groan. The second book is Gormenghast. And the third book is Titus Alone. all of which are library copies that I picked up from the West Friends at the Library book sale Nook, although they are actually DXs from different communities' public library. Have not gotten to them. And then I have yet another trilogy. I guess I could have said the shelf of trilogies because I have several trilogies on this shelf. Anyway, so the next trilogy is The Stone Dance of the Chameleon by Ricardo Pinto. The first book is The Chosen. The second book is The Standing Dead. And the third book is The Third God. So this series is about sort of has no magic, but has sort of humans living alongside dinosaurs in a very grim society based on cruelty. And I don't know why I picked this series up because I really did not like what I read of the first book. But I do have that habit, which I guess on an individual basis is not such a bad thing, trying new books out or trying to do a bill redemption. But when you're doing a library tour and it's practically every book, it is a bit disheartening. Anyway, the next three books are all by Alistair Reynolds, two of which are in a series, and I think the third one is a standalone. This is Redemption Arc, which is the sequel to Revelation Space. Never got around to it. I have read Chasm City, though, which is, I think, the third of the Revelation Space novels. This is about a hunt for a war criminal who basically just does nothing but make people's lives worse. I don't really remember much about beyond that. It has been a very long time since I read this book. And I also have Pushing Ice, which I've never read. The next three books are by Rebecca Roanhorse. The first two are a duology, A Trail of Lightning, and the second book is Storm of Locusts. They're part of the Sixth World. So this is a post-apocalyptic fantasy set on an independent Navajo reservation when the rest of the world has fallen apart. I've read Trail of Lightning and it's okay, but not spectacular. Although I don't actually really recall much about it. And then I also have Black Sun, which is the first book in a trilogy, whose third and final volume is coming out either later this month or next month. I think it's this month. Not a fan, though. The one Kim Stanley Robinson book I have is The Years of Ice and Salt, which I've never gotten around to. This is The White Mists of Power by Christine Catherine Rush. Never read it. This is The Mask of the Sun by Fred Saberhagen. I never read this. I know I read something by Fred Saberhagen, I think. Might have been somebody else that I didn't get on with, but I've never gotten around to this one. Next is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. The Last War, Book 1. I don't know if there are any sequels, though. I've never gotten around to it. And from the cover, it looks to be quite grimdark. The next book is an anthology, A New Sons, original speculative fiction by people of color, edited by Nisi Shaw. This is a pretty good anthology. I quite liked it. There are quite a number of interesting stories in here. This is White Trash Warlock by David R. Slayton. This is a contemporary fantasy series that is rather similar to the Tarot Sequence by Katie Edwards, although more on the side of urban fantasy or contemporary fantasy than sort of the slightly alternate fantasy or alternate Earth fantasy that is the Tarot Sequence. It's about a young warlock from lower social standing who basically works as a sort of a private investigator, a magical private investigator, which I think most urban fantasy is. And I didn't like it, which is why I seemingly never bothered to pick up any of the sequels. The next three books are by Clark Ashton Smith. First up is The Return of the Sorcerer, the best of Clark Ashton Smith. So this is the first book of Clark Ashton Smith that I read. I'm a fan of his work, although, as with most things science fiction and fantasy, that sort of that has declined over the last few years. I also have Lost Worlds, which is another collection of his work, in this hideous cover. I do not understand the reasoning behind this cover at all, except for maybe to scare my mother, but I don't think the people who put this together would have ever known that, but my mom is afraid of spiders. And I also have The Dark Eidolon and Other Fantasies from Clark Ashton Smith in this Penguin Classics edition, which is surprising. Because I would not think he would have gotten a Penguin Classics, but he did. The last two books on the shelf are by Nancy Springer. The White Heart, which is the first book in a tetralogy, or quintology. I don't remember if there's 4 books or 5 books in the series. So this is The White Heart. Did not get on with it. And I also have the final book in the series, The Golden Swan, which I largely picked up for this cover, which I adore. I really enjoy that cover. But I tried the book a few years ago and didn't get on with it. But at least there's the cover. So anyway, BookTube, that concludes shelf 10 of science fiction and fantasy. There are 2 shelves left, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up, and I will see you next time. So till then, thank you, BookTube. Have a great afternoon and stay safe.